horse go from serious injury and despair to dominating in the competitive arena with the help of equine myofunctional therapy?
Hi, my name is Yvette Waller. I'm an equine myofunctional therapist, which is sports massage for horses, and a professional bit fitter. I help horses to feel better.
Massage has many benefits to horses, including stimulating the healing process, which was good for Duke because he was seriously injured in an accident travelling in the float. In 2016, I was completing my massage studies and I had to pick some horses to be the practical case studies. Duke became an appropriate choice because he belonged to a good friend of mine, Crystal, and I also knew that he had suffered a serious floating accident some months earlier and that he really wasn't recovering very well at all. Prior to his accident, Duke had been loaned to family and he was competing in camp drafting. Camp drafting is an Australian sport that includes chasing cattle at high speeds. He was doing really well at camp drafting and he was fit, muscly, shiny. He was in excellent condition before he had his accident. Duke was actually on his way home from the loan when he had his accident, in which he fell down in the float and several times. So part of the reason why he did fall down in the float, Crystal suspected that he actually had a mild case of something called Australian string halt. Australian string halt is a neurological condition and it involves the horse being unable to correctly move and use their back legs, which includes to walk forwards and backwards, and basically they hyperextend their legs. This can cause a horse to panic, and in the case of Duke, it's suspected that he had something like this because he struggled to get onto the float in the first place. And then once he was on the float, he fell down several times, even though the driver was driving very carefully. In the end, Duke actually had to be dragged out of the float because he couldn't get up. So it was a really serious accident. In the days, weeks and months following, it became clear that Duke had done some serious damage. He really wasn't recovering well at all. It would have been months before I met him, and I know that Crystal had tried all of the things that are recommended for these kind of accidents. He'd had prolonged rest, he'd had a lot of herbal and supplement treatments, he was on a balanced diet, and he'd also been seen by an equine veterinary chiropractor. But it really just seemed like nothing was helping him to get better and he was just really stalled in his recovery. So from his accident, Duke went from looking $1 million. He was fit, fat and shiny in peak competitive condition before his accident to after the accident, and by the time I met him quite a few months later, his muscles had wasted away. You know, Crystal used to say he looked like a coat hanger, which is pretty apt description. His coat condition was terrible. He was acted and looked really depressed. He couldn't trot or canter in the paddock. He just kind of limped around the paddock. And this is a horse that's a draft horse cross. So he's a big horse. And so for him to go from such a peak condition to then being so injured, it was really clear that something was very wrong. When I offered for Duke to be one of my case studies for a massage study, it was really a case of Crystal trusting that I wouldn't harm him, but also being quite sceptical about what help it could have. After everything she'd tried and the amount of time that he'd had to recover, he really didn't seem to be improving. For each massage session, I assess the health of the muscles and then treat them with a variety of massage techniques. I distinctly remember my first massage with Duke that I felt that I had to be so careful. His muscles were so wasted, his condition and his coat condition was so poor, and he responded as if he was in so much pain. He was really overreactive to touch, so I had to be very gentle and go very delicately. I remember massaging him and so much of his muscles were not only wasted but almost sunken, which you can see from the photos. And so I just had to massage the outline of where a muscle would be and just try to imagine what it might feel like in the future if it could regain shape in order to treat it appropriately. He was also really spooky, and this is another issue that could be a bit dangerous from massaging, so I was just very careful massaging him. You can see in some of the early videos of Duke that when he walked, he had to take regular pauses. It was like he just froze and he couldn't continue walking. He, as I said, he was also very spooky, and he just seemed overall very depressed. He'd held his head very low and seemed quite miserable. He was really weak. So he was so weak he couldn't get his feet picked up. He couldn't pick his feet up for the farrier. He also couldn't do any stretches. So the only plan that we had in terms of treatment was massage. Duke completed his 3 complimentary massages as part of my case study, and with each massage we started to see some really promising changes in his shape, his condition, and his overall demeanour. He started to seem a lot brighter and happier. I remember it being such a cause for celebration when Crystal saw Duke go faster than a walk in his paddock. It was really like, wow, he is getting better. Once I was qualified, Duke went on to receive regular, which is every few months, massages with me because we'd seen the benefit that it had had, and he just began to really blossom. His coat condition improved, his muscle health improved, his mobility and his function, and he eventually came to where you couldn't tell about his previous injury unless you knew about it. So he really became sound overall. Duke was an excellent case study because he was in such poor muscular and emotional health when I first met him that through treating him with massage, I learnt about how much it can benefit a horse, especially one that's suffering from a serious injury. I hope that the story of Duke can help to inspire you, especially if you have a horse that's suffering from muscular injury. Duke became a really good example of how it's possible for a horse to go from being very injured and lame to actually eventually becoming very sound and having a really great ridden career with the help of equine myofunctional therapy. Over the past few years, Duke was brought back into work gradually once it became clear that he was definitely sound. Crystal, with her skills as a rider, started to train Duke in a variety of disciplines, and he became a really handy and multi-talented all-rounder. So the videos and photos that I'm sharing with you show just how many disciplines Duke competed and trained in and how successful he was. So Crystal competed him again in the cattle work disciplines such as camp drafting and stock horse events, and he proved really good at those. He also showed a real talent competing in pony club and adult riding club events and gymkhanas. So he was trained and competed in disciplines such as dressage, show jumping and eventing, and showed real skills in all of those areas. Crystal competed Duke actively for a couple of seasons, and really I don't think they ever came out of any event without a ribbon, and they were mostly blue. So that just goes to show how well Crystal was able to train Duke and how good he was feeling. It seemed like he was really grateful to have the opportunity to get out there and to use his muscles. It was like he was grateful because he had been so injured that he was then able to get out there and show off again. He seemed really happy to be the chosen one. Seeing Duke out and about competing and in peak physical condition, it became kind of hard to remember how bad he had been in the years prior from his accident, and he became such an inspiration for how EMT can really help horses to trigger that healing process as it did with Duke. What's Duke up to today? So Duke is now semi-retired. He gets out and about occasionally for the odd muster to get the cattle in or a trail ride, but more or less he lives a life of leisure. He takes care of a herd of broodmares and youngsters in his paddock. I've really enjoyed looking back on Duke's journey with the help of EMT and how he went from being so injured to blue ribbon working condition. It was really a journey of dedication, care and commitment from Crystal, with a little bit of faith that he could get better. So that was Duke's story. I hope it's inspired you. If you're interested in learning more about EMT or bit fitting, or if you live in Gippsland and want to contact me to make a booking for your horse, please get in touch.